A very, very warm welcome. And welcome to this Coffee and Learn, as it called. And I think coffee can be taken from the looks of where everyone's from. Can be breakfast, it can be afternoon coffee, and it can be an evening after dinner coffee. So I hope you have that little bit of warmth close to you. My name is Greet Gadamar. I am with the Synergist and I'm a senior project director. I'm here together with my colleague Aurora and with a very nice group of speakers today where we will be looking at the rules of engagement, navigating codes of conduct for patient engagement. So very happy to have you all here and joining us. So if we take a look at the, before we get started, I think most of you already know this, but we ask you, if possible, to put your microphones on mute just to allow the speakers to go through their sessions. There will be times where we can then go walk through questions and answers. But please, if you do have questions that pop up in your mind, please put them in the chat and or any comments that you have, and we'll be covering those as well. We'll be recording this session. We are recording this session, so those then will be the session will be made available at a later date. But I think most of all, the most important message here is let's make this workshop interesting, which I am convinced it will be, but interesting in the sense that let's share information with each other. I think and with the speakers that we have, I think that will really instigate some great conversations. So. If we're looking, if we can add the next slide, for those of you who wish, there is an opportunity to have use the live translation tools that will be entered in the chat. So it's feel free to open that up and select your language if you would feel more comfortable in doing that. So just checking that that works with everybody who needs it. Okay. All right. And if we now look at today's agenda, we're going to be looking at an overview of rules of engagement with a Q&A that will happen immediately thereafter. Then we'll be looking at an overview of the national trade associations and the country codes of conduct. We'll have an introduction to the PE country guidelines. And then we're going to dig a little bit deeper and look at examples and patient engagement country guidelines. And the examples that we'll be walking through are Sweden, Czech Republic, Philippines, and Ireland today. And then we're going to have a panel of Q&A that will allow us to have that interesting discussion and interaction together. I would like to very warmly introduce our speakers. Thrilled to have the speakers that we do have today. Firstly, we have Julie Bonham, and Julie is Legal and Compliance Director at FPA. We have Andrea Kashut, and Andrea is the Compliance Advisor for Life Sciences in GCO Global. And we've got Sarah Davies, who is Senior Director, Patient Strategy and Engagement at Lumanity. I do also want to add that Aurora Lancha, Project Manager at the Synergist, will also be presenting today. So thank you very much, ladies, for joining us. And I would now like to hand the floor to Julie. So Julie, if you can... Let's make sure that the speaker is working. I would like to warmly welcome you and have you go through the overview of the rules of engagement. Floor is yours, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud
Okay,
and clear.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for inviting me again. I am really happy to be here and to have the opportunity to explain to you why all these rules. So we will start now because I would like to leave a little bit of time for the question because thank you, it's always interesting. So the basic things that for the first things we learn at law university is so you have a kind of hierarchy of law. And so, especially for the pharmaceutical industry as well, so all come from the EU directive that is transposed into national legislation. So this directive is transposed. Sometimes it's a copy paste. Sometimes you have some national specificity. Sorry for that. And then because the pharma industry a long time ago wanted to commit to higher standards that only the ones that were in the EU directive. They decided to have a self-regulation code that we call FPA code, and this is the same principle. So the FPA code is the minimum standard, and then it is transposed in the FPA country, so the country in scope of FPA. But of course, looking into sometime national specificity. So this makes the framework really difficult, but the principles are the same. So if you can move to the next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So the legal provision includes something that is really key. So first of all, the directive itself do not mention patient or patient organization at all. So all the provision applicable to the public apply to patient and patient organization because in the directive I mentioned, so sorry, it is a directive 2001/83 of the European Union, the one that is under revision currently. So what is key to know, it is that this directive says that pharmaceutical industry can share information with healthcare professional, and it's even narrower than healthcare professional because it is person qualified to prescribe or purchase a medicinal product. So this means that everything else should be limited. So they cannot, for example, share any information about prescribed medicine in the spirit of selling them, you know. So every type of information, activity, or inducement that is designed to promote the prescription, supply, sales, or consumption of a medicinal product is only for healthcare professional. So not the public, not the patient, not the patient organization. But I put on the slide pharma can share information with you about, yes. So, for example, if you ask a question to a pharma company, they can answer, of course. They can also share factual or informative announcement and everything that is related to disease. So this is the frame of the law. So can we move to the next slide? Thank you. Yes, thank you for putting the reference in the chat. Thanks a lot. So based on that, you know that and you know that pharma has interaction with patient organization and patient organization representative. So at one point of time, the FPA members say, okay, we need to include. We need to recognize this interaction, and so we will add them into the FPA code, even if they are not considered in the directive. And this is the reason why we include interaction related to patient organization and patient organization representative. The definition of the patient organization and the patient organization representative are a copy-paste of the PFMD definition. So you have a reference in the code because we wanted to align with PFMD, with an official definition. Can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this yes, this interaction are mainly related to type of interaction, but you have to know that in any case, every provision of the FPA code apply to patient organization and patient organization representative. We do not mention patient. I address the point now because In some country, it used to exist provision saying that pharma industry cannot interact directly with patient. It is less and less the case, but it's really something that is really depend on the national code. So we do not include them at that time in the FPA code provision, but this is something we repeatedly discuss with the member. But of course, when someone asks me, I say, okay, if you have to interact directly with the patient, please apply the same principle, and especially, all the rules about hospitality, all the gift prohibitions should be extended to patient as well. So the type of interaction, you know them probably. So with patient organization, it's mainly donation and grants to support healthcare research or education. This is really the place where a pharma company will give you an amount of money that is affected to a project, but you do, yes, you manage the project the way you want. A sponsorship, it is an amount that is provided usually to organize an event, and contracted services, it is consultancy or participation in advisory board or things like that. Whatever the type of interaction, a company cannot require to be the sole founder of an organization. So, for example, if a company A provide you a grant and provide to a patient organization a grant and say, I want to be the only one, it's not authorized. It is against the code. Then sometimes it happens that a company is the only one, but if he has not asked for it, it's okay because we welcome broad funding and for patient organization and all that to respect your independence. This is mentioned on the slide later. And of course, especially with patient organization representative, we apply exactly the same standard as the one we apply to healthcare organization and healthcare professional for event and hospitality. So the rules on what can you pay, who can be invited, who can attend, and the gift prohibition as well also apply to patient organization. Can you move to the next slide? Yes, thank you. So this is also in the code, you have specific requirement for patient organization. It is because at the time it was really a specific code. We used to have a code about interaction with HCPs and a different code for patient organization and another code for disclosure. And we merge everything, but we keep these specific requirements that apply only to PO. It's common sense, but it's true that it's key principle. So yes, any partnership must take place in an ethical and transparent manner. Independence of patient organization is absolutely key. And maybe I need to mention that this was written 15 years ago, if not 20 years ago, because today I think it's not necessary to remind this. But at that time, patient organizations were maybe smaller, not less organized, but maybe less used to interaction with pharma company. So we wanted really this provision were to protect patient organization. Because now, yes, you can consider that this is a really common sense. Interaction based on mutual respect with the view and decision of each having equal value. And then, so no promotion of a particular prescribed only medicine. Sorry for the acronym. It is, you can read medicine here. And transparency. In any case, you need to have a written agreement, and a pharma company cannot influence on the text written by a patient organization. So this is really the key provision. So why all these rules? So all these rules are there not to make your life difficult. So I try to always explain that. It's really to protect each other. It's to demonstrate the legitimacy of the collaboration. So really the written agreement, for example, is key because you will explain everything that you will do. The pharmaceutical company will also explain what they expect, and it cannot be considered as improper payment or undue influence. We also want to make sure that the key principle of the non-promotion of a medicinal product to the public is respected because, as I told you at the beginning, it is a provision from the directive. And so you can have really a big penalty on that one. So this is really also to make sure that the interaction is not to promote a particular medicine. And here, yes, so the mission, why lawyer and compliance officer make your life difficult sometimes, it's to secure the collaboration and to reduce the risk. And I think the other one is about your right as patient when you engage with pharma industry. So first of all, you must be informed about the purpose, the scope, and the potential outcome of the engagement. This is key. Uh, you need to have a total disclosure of company affiliation and how the data, if data are collected, will be used. Any compensation that can be offered to you must be proportional and commensurate with a lot of objective criteria such as experience, expertise, and time investment, and also the difficulty of the mission. That is something that can be taken into consideration. Then we come back to the respect part, so equal value. So your perspective, your skills, and your experience must be taken into consideration. And having a collaboration on more on a long-term vision other than having a short-term need and yes, value each other contribution. And on privacy and consent, this is really important. So if personal health data are collected, this must comply with the GDPR or and national privacy law. You need to consent to the use of the data or the publication. And you should always be able to opt out, or to say, okay, I do not want to take part. And yes, no pressure to endorse or promote product. No, of course not. I hope this never happen. And but you also have obligation on the next slide. Stay informed. So if you want, so stay up to date with the project goals. Ask clarification if it's not clear. Maintain confidentiality if there is a non-disclosure agreement, and disclose. Be open about this relationship. And this is to avoid having perceived bias. So yes, we consider that if you are transparent, you reduce a part of the biased effect. And on the last slide, you have, it's a nice slide prepared by Oana, my colleague. And here you have all the materials that you can find on FPA website. You know that we have a FPA patient think tank at FPA, of course. And so we try to develop a document when it is needed. So of course you have the FPI code, but we also created a guiding principle on agreement. Also, we also have some guidance on the principle for remuneration. And a long time ago, I think it was 10 years ago, we developed also working together with patients, highlighting the principle for collaboration between pharma and patient organization. That's all from my side. I think we have 4 minutes for the question. Sorry if I extend a little bit the time.
I think you're perfectly on time, Julie. Thank you so much. I'm looking here. So just for everyone, if you haven't seen yet in the chat, there have been some links dropped that have been referenced, so feel free to take a look at those. Farouk, I think you have a question. Do you feel comfortable in coming off mute and posing your question?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. No
Great.
problem at all. Hi, Julie. Thank you for that presentation. It was excellent, really insightful. I was just wondering, with what you've told us with regards to the EU directive and the kind of regulations in respect of prescription-only medicines. When I think about prescription-only medicines, under the broader definition of HTAs, health technology assessments. HTAs also covers devices and procedures. And I know this is a adjacent question. I just wondered if the EU directives that you've just talked about also covers devices and procedures, or if it's just strictly for prescription only medicines.
The directive, thank you for the question. Sorry. Yes, the directive is only, so it's 20 years ago. It was written 20 years ago, but it's only about prescribe only medicine with this framing. But of course, if I was a patient organization or a company working in device, I would tend to align with the principle because it is to secure the patient organization. So I would extend, this provision to device. And I currently work, yes, with some medical device company as well. So I think the spirit should also be to protect the patient.
That's really, really helpful. Just to kind of read between the lines of what you've just said in terms of extending the principle. Is that because there are no EU directives that cover devices specifically? Is that the reason why?
I think you have the MDR directive, so the medical device, no, regulation, sorry, it's not a directive. So I think for strictly, sorry, because I do not know really well yes, the text for medical device, but I know that you have a specific regulation. I would be surprised to see any provision related to patient, but this is something I can double check with MedTech Europe, the equivalent of FPA for medical device.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Farouk. And I see, Sophie, you've also added a comment and a question. Would you feel comfortable in coming off mute?
Yeah, thanks. Great. Yeah. I was typing in that industry, it said a number of times, needs a clear early engagement with patient advocates to help shape clinical trials. However, we know that that's tricky because some industry partners, then the compliance teams have issues with enabling that early engagement and claim it's not possible. So, and it's something that happens across many industry partners. So how can we solve this? We've been asking this of the ABPI as well, but it is clearly a barrier. So can something be done to help these very early contacts? We know that some industry partners manage to do it without problems. Others claim compliance is an issue. And then I have an add-on question as well. At conferences, we are often sort of recently been pushed back from attending conference halls. Could patient groups be recognized or patient advocates be recognized as a professional group, separate, very separate from the general public, and therefore be allowed to attend congresses, even though we're not prescribers? So that's my two questions. Thank you.
So on the first question, yes, we can do something, but only with the support of National Health Authority, I would say. So it is something because it's a risk assessment, because as I explained at the beginning, it is totally against the directive, to engage, and especially before the marketing authorization, because you cannot engage after the marketing authorization, but before it's also really difficult. But I fully agree that there is collaboration between company and patient group for the design of clinical trials. This is something key. So I think, this is my personal opinion. I think the only way to secure this is probably to add a third party. And I think, probably NHS in UK or ANSM in France, if you work with and if you describe, and probably you can write a guidance, so it's not a kind of clarification that in this area, we have all considered that it is secure to interact because this is for the benefit of patient at the end. So this is one way. And on the access to Congress, it's really also really difficult because the reason why you cannot access is because you also have promotional materials in the exhibition area at Congress. But we recently draft a guidance for Congress organizer to of course allow patient advocates to attend the Congress, but with different badges to make sure that they will not be exposed on promotional material. So it depends on country. I don't know in which country you are based, but the rules vary from a country to another.
Yeah, it's well, I happen to be based in the UK, but I attend lots of different congresses as well, together with my colleagues, and in the last few years, it's just become worse. Hence my question: if patient advocates could be recognized as professionals, separate, because the issue is about the difference between patient advocates and the general public. So if there was a clearer definition and a clear distinction from the general public, that would allow us to attend on a par with nurses and journalists and so on, who are exposed to promotional material, but still allowed to attend, even though they don't prescribe as such.
Mm. No, I know. It's a really difficult issue, and we really try to find common European rules. But of course, at national level, they also have their own national text as well, and so sometimes it's really difficult. But we are perfectly aware of that. And you know, in 2020, I did a FPA code training, and I say you should ask a definition in a legal text. You know, you should ask to be recognized as patient organization, patient representative, patient advocate, etc., etc. And it's true that this is something that yes, I think this is really needed now. But I took note.
If you could assist us, I know it's your personal perspective, but I think we got lots of thumbs up from other people at the moment. It was like going mad with thumbs up. And I think we really, really need to do that. So, I'm part of specifically the EHA. I'm in the EHA pack as well, and we've been writing letters to say this is the second year now where we're being excluded from the Congress Hall. And it's a real barrier to us exercising our professional capacity. And I know we want pharma companies want us there as well. It's a real problem for them as well. It's a problem for Congress organizers with whom we work very closely, hence the EHA pack and many other committees of medical organizations. So I can see lots of other thumbs up from various people. So if please, it's a request, not just from me, but from many others. Can we set up something? Can we have that legal text that would overcome that problem?
Yes, but I think you need to contact ABPI. If you are based in UK, it
Oh,
will be.
no, this is now EHANIX. So last year it was in Italy, so that's the
Okay.
problem. This year it's in Sweden, same thing. So it's not just
Okay.
the UK.
It's not only UK,
And the
sorry.
concern is that there's a little bit of contagion going on,
Mm.
and it's going to happen in other countries as well. So can we have an action, a commitment that something will be attempted, because it's broad.
Well, it's-
Is there a way for you to send me an email because I cannot commit here now, I need to ask my member and so if you can share some background information with me, it would be
Yeah,
really
sure.
great because okay, and then I can discuss that at FPR.
Based on the number of thumbs up and I know that PEOF and PFMD and so on and the synergists are in line with all of that. So we're very happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for raising the topic. These are exactly the kind of conversations that it's great to have together. I know there were a couple more questions, and what I suggest we do is we move on with the speakers, and then we'll go back to those questions as time allows. So if we could perhaps now hand over to Andrea. Thank you very much, Julie, for the presentation and responding to the questions. Andrea, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Bree. Thank you, Julie, also for the introduction previously. I will start by mentioning a bit more what the national trade associations are and what is the role for the code of conducts which are associated to each country. And in order to kick off the presentation, we can start with the question that we have for all of you. We were just curious to learn how familiar are you with the national pharmaceutical associations and their codes? Are you using them on a regular basis? Is it something you look at whenever in doubt of any situation for engaging patient groups, patients, stakeholders like healthcare professionals? So please scan the QR code on the screen and let us know what is your understanding currently. Okay, I think all the participants are quite engaging now. It's interesting to see the percentage. So some of you are very familiar, some of you are not familiar at all. Some of you might know they exist, and some of you probably never heard of it, which I think you're in the right place. This is the purpose also for the meeting today, to make you a bit more acquainted with what this information is or where it can be found. So I will be moving into the next slide talking about pharma national trade associations. The pharmaceutical trade associations represent the industry at different levels, which are national, regional, and global. As you can see here on the screen, we have given a few examples for each category. It's important to remember that they play a crucial role in shaping the policy, aligning the regulations, and setting the ethical standard between the industry and the stakeholders. And they also act as a bridge between companies, governments, and society, helping ensuring that patients and patient groups, they do get access to safe and innovative medicines. It's important to remember that the national trade associations, they connect pharma companies with the policymakers, and they are helping shaping the regulation and making it ethical and compliant whenever we are talking about engagement with patient groups, patients, or healthcare professionals. They matter because they provide a unified voice across geographies. They enable access to safe and innovative medicine globally. They are also fostering cross-border collaboration and harmonization, and they often prioritize, of course, the industry sustainability and making sure that all the engagement that is across the industry is compliant and ethical. Moving now into the next slide, where we will understand a bit more about the National Code of Conducts and how can you use this in your advantage whenever you are engaging with the industry. The national codes are self-regulatory frameworks, and they define how pharmaceutical companies should behave ethically. They cover areas like promotion, interactions with healthcare professionals, patient groups, patients. They also include a lot of guidance in regards to transparency and how to have a compliant interactions whenever you are engaging with a specific country. These codes are essentials for building trust and ensuring that there is consistency whenever you are engaging with the industry. And it helps, of course, reducing the risk for misconduct and any unethical behavior that could arise whenever you are having these engagements. Of course, any national code of conduct ensures that pharma company, they operate ethically transparent, and they are responsible, of course, in all their stakeholder interactions. They build trust, they ensure consistency within the industry practice, and they reduces the risk for misconduct and therefore, of course, the reputational damage. Here on the screen, we have included a few key components that you can find in a typical code of ethics. Normally, they are structured in the same way. They cover, of course, interactions with healthcare professionals, patient groups, sometimes patients, depending on the country and the jurisdiction. So whenever in doubt, you can always access the website of the National Code of Conduct for the country that you are interested in, and all the information is laid there. The industry also is trying to update these codes as often as possible. We see, of course, a tendency of having maybe a yearly update, or sometimes in case there is a law at a local level that affects also the National Code of Conduct, the codes are also updated maybe mid-year or depending on when the update comes into play. So it's important to have a look once in a while and see if there are any updates before actually looking at taking a decision, or making sure you were looking at the last document and not maybe something you had saved from a previous year or a previous quarter. So I think that's a very good tip to try to access the official page whenever you are looking into the National Code of Conduct. And I think in collaboration with the PFMD and POF, the purpose of developing the country cards, also the purpose for which we are meeting today as well, is to help industry go more to the point whenever they have to engage with a specific country. We are trying to streamline a bit the information and give access to the updated codes. Of course, we are trying to include updated links as often as possible in the cards, and have, let's say, a standardized guidance on what are the main pillars whenever you have to engage with patients, patient groups, or any stakeholders that are maybe related to patient organizations. Now, I prepared, of course, 2 case studies, which can help us understand a bit more how the codes operate and what you can maybe find stated in there and what is a bit more alongside the gray area whenever you're trying to maybe define a certain term or have a certain interaction with a patient organization or a patient representative. And so I can move into those later on whenever we get to that section.
Yeah, maybe very quickly before we move into the case studies, we just wanted to take a moment to, as Andrea was mentioning, take you through the resources that from PFMD we've been creating to support in navigating all these compliance challenges in patient engagement. We have different guidances for all the countries where we try to outline these parameters through a traffic light system, and also for patient organizations and also individual patients and caregivers. The idea is to have something, a resource that is short, visual, and easy to use, both for industry and for patient organizations and patient representatives, to understand what are the different regulations that are applying in different countries when it comes to the remuneration, reimbursement, hospitality, and transfer of value reporting. I will be dropping some links in the chat so you can find them in signups and in the PFMV website. But overall, these are all the countries that are already available. And as Andrea was mentioning, we work on reviewing them and updating whenever there's a new regulation released. So I will be just sharing the link in a minute. And if you want to drop a comment in the chat around any country that you think it would be key for us to focus on during the rest of this year, or any other suggestion, feel free to go for it. And back to you, Andrea, for the examples.
Thank you, Aurora. I can deep dive directly into Sweden. We have chosen this National Code of Conduct also because there was an update in the beginning of the year. So it's an example of a code that decided to update a few provisions right in the beginning of the year. I believe in February. They are effective as of February 1st, 2026. The main updates in the Code of Conduct are related to more flexibility for patient materials, which are, of course, clearly separated from promotion. I believe in the previous code it was not so, let's say, obvious, and now the articles have been updated in order to make sure that it's very clear. From that perspective, there is also a new section on patient support programs, which is an overarching term for information transfer directly between company and patients. It's also emphasized that the patient support program should always be offered by the healthcare system and not directly from a company. So that's also something important to look at whenever we are in this situation. There are also a few articles that refer to a more standardized transparency system. And also there are instructions on how transparency should be completed whenever applicable. There's also the reporting deadline that was updated to within 3 months from when the collaboration starts. It's also an important update. And also the supporting documentation that normally you gather whenever you are interacting with the industry should be saved in your records for 3 years instead of 2. These are the main changes to the code. And now going back to how the code is looking at patient organizations and patients as individual, it is very interesting to notice that the code itself has articles that refer to patient organizations as a stakeholder. They have a specific article that is stating how patient organizations should be engaged, what is the remuneration that you can offer, how you should be performing the assessment of choosing a patient organizations, and all these details which are relevant whenever an organization decides to engage with the industry. It's also interesting to notice that they also regulate the collaboration with patients who are not member of an organization. So we understand, of course, from these provisions that it is allowed to have a consulting contract with a patient that is engaged on an individual basis and not necessarily through a patient organization. However, the rules for this engagement, of course, are very strict as any other rules included in the code. And it's very important to have a written agreement. It's very important to have a fair compensation. It's very important to make sure that you are remunerating the party that was stipulated in the contract. So, for example, if you're engaging with a patient and the contract is with him as an individual, it's important that the payment goes to the individual. Or if you are engaging with a patient organization and a patient representative was acting on behalf of the patient organization, it's important to make the payment in the patient organization account. So it is very interesting to notice that whenever in doubt, the code does regulate and allows engagement with patient groups and also patients as individuals. And as long as we consider, of course, the strict conditions of a formal contract, of a control compensation, and making sure you're reaching to the patient through an organization, then everything should be as compliant as the code is stating that these interactions should be. Of course, it also emphasized the non-promotional character of the interaction. So the compliance framework that you as a company also have set up should be matching that. And it's something very important that we need to consider whenever we are engaging with patient groups and patients. I can move now into the next case study, which is Czech Republic. We also chose to look at this case because the code, the AFP Code of Practice, covers the interactions between member companies and patient organizations. However, it is not so clear that maybe you can engage patients as individuals. So you have to read carefully through the articles, look maybe at the section of questions that they also have on the website and understand what is permitted to do. So while going through the code, we will notice that there is an article that states that it's permitted to contract patient organization representatives as consultants, whether in group or individually, for services which are related, of course, to speaking engagement, clinical trials, training services, participation in advisory board or market research, whenever involves remuneration or hospitality. So even though the code itself doesn't really break down in section how you can engage with patient representatives or patient as individuals, we do understand from this type of article that it is permitted to also engage with patients as individuals. Of course, all the other rules that are applicable to patient organization representatives are also applicable to patient contracted as individuals. So it's also very important to remember that the remuneration must be reasonable. There must be a fair market value that you should, of course, always look at. There's always a written agreement. There's always an event that must be related to the area of professional interest of the patient representative. And you always need to be very careful to make sure that the engagement is not used as an endorsement to promote or a specific material or medicinal product. So it's important to keep the interaction as non-promotional. And it's also required to disclose, of course, these transfers of value that go to patient organizations. So in big lines, the code itself, it could be a bit more less explanatory than the one in Sweden. However, it is important to go through the code, to read through the lines and make sure you understand a bit what is allowed and what is not allowed. And I understand that sometimes it can be a bit difficult, especially maybe if someone that doesn't have a legal background or someone that doesn't really has experience in reading this type of documentation. Sometimes it's not so straightforward to go through the text and understand what exactly it's allowed. And again, that's also the purpose for which we at the GCO, also in collaboration with PFMD, we're putting the efforts in the country cards and trying to offer a bit of a starting point in what you should be looking at whenever you are opening the PDF of the code or the link of the National Code Association. Those were my case studies. Of course, I'm happy to answer questions after the all case studies are presented. And now I can give the floor to Sarah to continue with the examples that she also prepared.
Thank you, Andrea.
Of course.
So we've heard about the overarching guidelines and the introduction from Julie, who explained how the guidance sort of filters down from international through to local codes. And this provides a structure for transparent and productive interaction and collaboration. And we thought it would be interesting to look at a couple of other scenarios and discuss two countries that have a slightly different approach in terms of how their codes are structured and how you might approach preparing to collaborate under those codes. So what difference does it make in practice if you're working with very detailed guidance, like in Ireland, which has quite a lot of detail and about particular processes, whereas a country like the Philippines has a more broad principle-based approach. So let's just have a look and see what some of the differences might be and how you might, what approach you might take to make sure that you're still complying with the relevant local and international codes. So they do vary by country, as we've already talked about. But some of the key elements will always be the same. So I think you've heard that very clearly from our other presenters. So there'll always be a written agreement. It's really important that the independence of patient organisations and individuals is kept consistent. And it also needs to be transparent. So you'll see some of those key elements through all different codes in all different countries. But when Ireland, so Ireland has a more formalized approach, and in the Philippines there is less practical detail. So with a code like in Ireland, and as we were just talking about, in some areas you might need to take a little bit more time to read through some of the detail, and that's where the country cards can also help to signpost you into what some of the key elements are, and where there might be very clear do's or don'ts. And where there's more structure, there might be more process to be aware of and to understand and follow. Whereas if there's less detail, like in a code in the code in the Philippines, there might be more flexibility on how you work together, but there might also be a need to have a bit more discussion up front to clarify how things will progress and what the expectations are from all sides and all parties. And I think what's probably important to realize is that in even the most detailed codes probably won't cover every possible scenario of collaboration. So what do you do if you haven't got clear guidance for the type of activity that you're discussing and that you're considering? So just looking here, you can see how the language in codes might vary. But if you actually look at what's being said, it's not saying that you can do things differently in either of these countries. It's just that Ireland might have more specific guidance, and the Philippines, you might need to have more discussion with the company that you're working with if you're a patient organisation. So in Ireland, it's clear that patient organisations can be reimbursed for contracted activities, while in the Philippines, this isn't explicitly stated, but it does later refer to the need for written documentation to describe any funding. So that implies that funding is permitted, and you just need to make sure that you have a clear and open conversation and confirm how that will be done and managed. So just because something isn't spelt out explicitly in a local code, it doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means that you need to have a conversation and discussion to make sure that you're clear on what is expected and how the interaction will be managed. So just if we can just move on to the next slide. So in countries where there is a detailed local guidance, how do you navigate through the requirements for contracting and payment processes and disclosure? There might be a lot to sort of sift through, and you'll definitely want to confirm how the activity will be contracted, confirm what the payment will be, how payment will be processed for services and sponsorships, and how it will be disclosed. And it's really important that you are clear and open about this between both parties from the start. And also to be aware of what the rules are around transparency, when that will happen, how it will happen, and to make sure that both organisations are prepared and ready to explain and have consistency in terms of how they describe the activity and what's involved. And then looking at a country where there might be less detail in the code, as I said, there might be variability between different companies, so it's really important to have a discussion with all parties involved to make sure that everyone understands what's expected, what will be funded, and how decisions will be taken. And in situations where you might not have the detail in the code, it might be that the company that you're working with will have guidance within their internal policies and procedures that might provide more clarity for you to follow. So those might take a slightly higher precedence than the detail in the code in that situation. But wherever possible, I think what's really clear is that there always needs to be a written agreement in terms of what's involved. You can, and clearly documented rationale particularly if the rules are not explicit, so that you can be very clear on why you're engaging in a particular activity, what the objective is, what the purpose is from both parties' expectations, and making sure that this is going to be made available if needed for transparency purposes. And particularly if any personal health data is being handled, you really just need to make sure that you're really clear on what the expectations are on both sides. So just moving on, that's fine, Aurora. Just moving on to another poll. We wanted to ask you all what you think is the most important factor for a transparent interaction between patients and pharma. So if you can just go back into Slido, and it's a free text box. So please share with us what you think. What do you think are the most important factors for a transparent interaction? And this could be for patients or patient organisations. So written agreement, trust, respect, honesty. I think these all reflect what we've been discussing over the last hour. And I think from a patient organisation or an individual patient perspective, it's really important to remember that you can request these things. If you're not sure about something, then it's you're well within your rights to speak up and ask for more detail or ask for confirmation about what is involved, what's required, timelines, what might be involved in contracting, and transparency. Thank you. So just to summarise, I think sort of the key things that we would suggest you would want to include in a checklist for any collaboration are that written description, including all the details on the activity and expectations on both sides, clarity around all the payment and funding. Hospitality, we haven't talked about that much, but again, there are usually references to hospitality in the codes, and it's something that we look out for and try and include in the country cards, what's appropriate and what isn't, and that does vary by country. And then, yes, just transparency, what will be disclosed, where and when, and also to consider how you as a patient organisation, as well as a pharma company, will declare and confirm openly what the activity is, what the funding is, and what the purpose is, so that it is a very clear, honest and open and transparent activity and collaboration. Thank you. So I'll hand back to Greet for Q&A.
Thank you very much, both to you, Sarah and Andrea, for the updates. I see we've still got some questions here. Was just wondering if anyone in particular wants to speak up, who has a burning question. Anyone who wants to come off mute? I was wondering, Robert, I don't know if you're still on, if there was anything particular from your perspective that you'd like to share with us with regards to Ireland.
Yeah, to me, there seems to be a continual conflict and a continual mistrust between pharma and patient organizations and patients. We have tremendous knowledge in our heads and our experience of living with illnesses, but we are being continually prevented from engaging with pharma. And the rules that was described earlier are actually what are preventing us from truly engaging. So, for example, when you have to engage with a pharma company, you have to channel it through a patient organization. But if that patient organization doesn't represent you and your experience of your illness, you are suddenly excluded from that process. So to me, that is excluding a portion of our society. And for example, I know in the UK, only 2% of people with diabetes are members of the Diabetes Association. So how can that association actually truly represent the patients in what it's saying? So you need to have that diversity of voices. But also, there seems to be in what is done a thought process that patients, because we would be paid or involved in these things, that we are going to be inherently biased and that we are going to be doing something that is going to be generating something for us as individuals rather than for our community. And this lack of trust in our ability to talk about medicines or be engaged with processes, I think is really a challenge. Um, and so take, for example, I was able to be an embedded patient researcher on a study from the very beginning. And but that was in academia and that was allowed, it was supported. But when I want to get involved with a pharma company, suddenly there's a whole load of obstacles in the way for me being actually engaged with that process. So um, to me, what I'm hearing from what is being said is an inherent mistrust in the ability of patients to engage with this process. And we have been striving so hard to be seen as people with knowledge and experience, yet the actions of the industry have been the opposite. And this is what we need to overcome. And I think what Sophie was saying earlier was really bang on in that uh, why is it that we are excluded from these conferences? Are we excluded from these meetings? Are we so deprived of intellect that we cannot understand the difference between learning about a new medication and then having to promote that? Just because I hear it doesn't mean I have to promote it. So um, I think there's a lot of education that has to go on. And I think it's basically to do with the rules. The way the rules are written are implying that the patients and the patient organizations are inherently incapable of being objective when looking at these things. And remember, as patients, all we want is the best possible outcome. And so there's no value to us in supporting a medicine or a treatment or a therapy that is going to give no value to our patient communities. And we will, as the people who are involved in that process, we will not be beneficiaries of that medication. It is going to be other members of our community that will be the main beneficiaries, unless you're talking about rare diseases. And so we're actually looking at serving our community, not as us as individuals, and therefore we don't have that bias. So I think the principles idea somehow is maybe better than the prescriptive thing, because I know myself in Ireland, I was blocked from doing things because I was not part of a patient organization. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. And I think going back to that last slide of trust, that's the big thing. We need trust both ways.
Absolutely. That came out loud and clear. Thank you, Robert. We have some more questions. I'm not meaning to pick on anyone in particular, but I see Ambra. I don't know if Ambra is still here. Is willing to speak up. If not, her question was with regards to the question was, and perhaps Robert, you have this off the top of your head as well, is the Irish code more similar to the English one, which is very strict? And if so, on which points?
Unfortunately, I don't have much experience of the English code.
Okay.
So can't really help you there. But
I don't know, Sarah, is this something that you know from a comparison point of view?
I was just going to say I wouldn't want to speak to both comparisons because although I am familiar with both, I think probably the point I was making in the presentation was that even when that level of detail doesn't necessarily mean it's stricter than something that doesn't have as much detail. So I think it's probably just working with the organization, the company that you're working with, to make sure that you understand what is being asked of you in a certain situation. But I think maybe just to go back to, I wouldn't disagree with, I can see in the chat that there's a lot about the challenges of working, collaborating together within the codes. And I think that's why it's really important to have discussions and to have these this opportunity to debate and raise some of the concerns and issues. And I think I can also see some of the certainly from my experience working with some of my clients, but also I've worked in-house in pharma and in patient organizations. And I think there's clearly that desire to work together. And I think a lot of pharma companies are, I've seen a difference, a real difference over the last 10 years in how much more collaboration there is. And I think patient engagement really is embedding. And I think that, patient engagement, patient advocacy teams are really leading the way internally and doing a lot to make it easier and to make it be seen as a more standard way of working, leaving aside the discussion earlier about congresses. So I think progress is being made. But whether it does come to a point where you have to say we're not going to get any further unless there is any change in the regulations or the code, then I think that's another discussion. But I just wanted to sort of give some hope, because I think I've certainly observed, and hopefully other people here as well have seen, that things are improving, but that doesn't mean we can't go even further. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think, yeah, there are some questions also around the compliance side. So if there are audits happening, Julie unfortunately has had to jump off due to a conflict. But one of the questions here was, are pharma companies being audited for compliance with the respective local code? So I don't know if there's anyone that is willing to speak up on their experience from that in that respect.
I can maybe take this one, Great. No problem. I think from our experience, it's also important to make the distinction between the pharma companies which are members of these associations and pharma companies which are not members. Of course, whenever a company becomes a member, the rules that they have in their national code becomes binding, and hence also their internal policies or framework needs to maybe be a bit adjusted to make sure they are matching the requirements, which are sometimes included in the code or sometimes even in the law of that specific countries. We do have countries which are also very specific when it comes to the actual law and then translating that into the code. However, what we've seen, of course, is that even though a lot of companies, they are not members of an association due to the fact that maybe they don't have presence in a certain market or they are new to a new market, either in Europe or globally, they do try to adhere to these rules, especially when engaging with stakeholders as patient organizations or patients. So they are very aware that, of course, even though the code, maybe it's not binding for them, they want to do the right thing. They want to remain compliant. They want to have the transparency that the industry is expecting from them. And in regards to the specific questions for the audit, I think it depends case by case. We have countries which maybe they do have such a control in place, and due to the fact that organizations have to publish, every year the patient organizations that they are engaging with, this can sometimes be aleatory checked by the associations, or sometimes it can be that they receive a note that they noticed something, and then this is where the check is initiated. I think to the point, it depends case by case, but you do have also situations where national codes do also check if their members are respecting those rules. However, for the companies that are not a member, it's a bit more difficult to keep track. However, the tendency is, of course, to try to obey to the rules as much as possible. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Andrea. I actually have a question perhaps for the group here. Oh, someone wanting to comment? No, that was perhaps not the intent. Just wondering if we look at um, the we've had a lot of discussion around the actual rules, but I was wondering, and feel free to put anything in the chat or raise your hand if there's like an unwritten rule that people have encountered of successful partnerships that really are not found in writing or any country guidelines. If there's anything that anyone can share of successes that they have seen in their own experiences.
I think Robert has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I
Yeah.
couldn't see that.
I think maybe if I just give an example of that study that I was on, as a patient, I was incorporated in the trial from the very, very beginning, okay, before they actually got ethical approval for the study. And because of that, there were changes that were made as a patient to how that trial was conducted. And it actually has now moved on to the final stage where they're doing the definitive trial, where there are more patients involved in the process. But that was academic. And these patients are being paid, they're getting a salary for their contribution. And that's accepted in the academic setting. And it's actually being promoted and in Ireland by PPI Ignite. It's being funded so that can happen. But in industry, that is not the case. And so I think we need to enable this interaction between patients and industry. And I think it's the rules that are actually the obstacle. It's a bit like in Ireland, we had a situation where people on some social welfare payments are not allowed to get involved in PPI work because of the social welfare rules. So there was a systemic obstacle. And now those rules are being changed. And that is enabling more PPI. But we need to do the same with industry. And also, we need to see government within the countries also supporting that. So when our Irish, the Health Service Executive in Ireland does not pay contributors, patient contributors, they refuse to it. And they're trying to change that at the moment, but it's in a process. So if government is not doing it, it makes it very difficult that you have industry has to do it, but government not doing it, that academia is doing it. We need a cohesive system between all of it, because the healthcare is a societal thing. It's not an industry thing. It's not a government thing. It's a societal thing. And so it should be similar all throughout. And I think this is where the conflict is. And this is where, as patients, we get confused that do you really want us, or are you actually putting obstacles in our way? And I think, like Sophie was saying earlier, we should be helping put those rules together. We should be helping to rewrite those rules that will enable more engagement, because we have seen that more patient engagement leads to better health outcomes at a better cost. And so we need to destroy those blocks, in those systemic institutional blocks that are there. And unfortunately, as patients, I don't know if our patient organizations really are fighting for that the way individual patients are, because the funding of patient organizations is so tenuous that it actually creates inherent bias, unintentional, from the patient organizations. So we're not really being represented. So I think this type of discussion is really powerful. It's needed, but we need to see the concrete examples of where patient involvement really works well, and then see that replicated throughout the industry.
Yeah. Hanif, I see your hand is raised as well.
Yes, thank you, Robert. I would slightly disagree with you there. I'm the patient and public involvement lead at Leeds. We've got over 25,000 people in clinical trials at Leeds. So what we do is we ensure that they're embedded within the research. Many of these trials are funded by the National Institute of Health Research. And there, as part of those trials and ongoing studies, we ensure that they're embedded as partners. And this has come from the government. This has come from the National Institute of Health Research, who've almost made it compulsory now that we need patient and public involvement. For that, we actually allocate around 5% of resource, which is not that much, but it's a pretty good start. And that 5% could be, we have patient and public involvement embedded in £5 million projects, and we've got them embedded in £5,000 projects. So regardless of the project, every single thing that we have done that's involved patients, there has been benefit. Nobody has said that this was a useless exercise. We didn't learn anything. Why did we bother doing this? It's something that's there, they can take advantage of, and there should be, and it's beneficial. And when they say we spend money on PPI, we say, no, you invest money. And what you do, your investment comes back to you manyfold. The return you will get is significant. You are investing this money. And also we embed the costings accurately. We actually go through what the proposal is. We look at where value can be added. It's not top and it's not tail. It's not the beginning and the end. It's all throughout. It's properly funded. You would not just add in a statistician or a health economist or a scientist or a lab technician into a research project or a research assistant without funding them. You would not do this. You would not dare do this. Why are you doing this with PPI? And what we've done is like we've taken our public patient involvement, we've commercialized it. I've also made a spin-off company called Riders that reviews patient information leaflets and PISs and ICFs for pharma. And we're working quite nicely with pharma on that. And so we've got a panel of about probably 150 people who review those documents before they go to ethics. So there is a lot of movement in that. The only thing is that it's not compulsory for pharma to do this step. This is a goodwill step. We need to move that away from, goodwill, nice to have, to must do. And we are trying to do this in the UK context, especially through the HRA. I've been working in this area for more than 20 years, and it's been a slow battle, but I think we almost call it the golden age of PPI, and that's where we are now. Before we were just, there were even roles like mine, there were just bit added on roles. And now, I'm absolutely inundated with so many companies contacting me, so many clinicians getting in touch that, we are, and now it's the opposite. Funding is not the issue. Quality is the issue, and delivering that kind of quality as well. So we're moving them away, and it's a slow burner as well. We need to educate the companies. They've not done this before. We can't be too hard on them. We always take a positive approach. But if you don't know, you know what you know, and let's come and work with us. And it doesn't matter what you don't know. We'll help you along that journey. So we've taken a very pragmatic approach.
Thank you so much, Hanif. I see, Sophie, you've got your hand raised. Perhaps a comment to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So same here, Hanif. I've done PPI in lots of places. I've sat on the NCRI when it was still there, and put in time and effort and so on. I also attend lots of congresses, including just a couple of months ago, where we have the same conversations. And it's true that some pharma companies, are starting to understand the benefit of co-creation of trials. So a lot of the stuff is still about patient information sheets and consent forms and so on. But where we need to be is pre-protocol. And so I added in the chat also that we need to work hand in hand with the regulators as well, because they have early submission advisory meetings with industry partners. And if there were advocates at those pre-submission stages where industry asks regulators, if we design it this way and that way, whatever, would you accept it, blah, blah, blah. And, if that was because most of the time there might be an interest from patient organizations, patient advocates for that as well. And it's at that stage, that very early stage, even before that, talking about unmet needs and so on in a trial, in a patient population, where you can slot in things that would be really good, where you gather the right data in the right way, with the right tools and so on, that then helps get a smoother process at regulator level and also at HTA level afterwards, because the right data is simply there, and the right data that is fully in the interest of the patient population that the drug is going to serve. So, but that's still not happening. But there are early signs of some commercial companies where the penny has dropped, literally, and and the pounds will drop as well if that is done in the right way. I've heard companies saying, follow the patient voice and the business will follow, kind of thing. And it's absolutely true. So we need that conversation with the regulators as well, hand in hand. So that was my 2 pennies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I think that is a great place to sort of conclude. I think, Sarah, you did have your hand raised, so I didn't want to.
Oh, thank you. I was only going to add, yeah, just to echo, I think what Sophie has said, and Hanif, I think it is happening, and I was just going to say, I know because I've worked with some pharmaceutical companies where they are involving patients in the early stages of medicines development, and it's great to see how that is genuinely having an impact on how clinical trials designed or the planning. So I think it is happening, but yeah, obviously more to do. But again, just wanted to sort of encourage everyone to continue to work together and talk about the opportunities.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. We are nearing the end of this session. We just wanted to put up a reminder of the upcoming sessions for you to perhaps pencil in on your calendars. So here they are up on screen. And we would really appreciate if everyone could do a very short survey. We promise it's very short of this session. Just on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to suggest this session to a friend or a colleague? So that's as easy as it gets. So please just hit the buttons. That gives us great feedback. These presentations and conversations, I think, to conclude that there is careful optimism. There's a way to go, but together as we voice these elements, we I believe can move some mountains, or at least hills to start off with, and then perhaps a mountain. So thank you so much for your input and your active participation. Thank you to the speakers as well for the interesting information shared. And so I would like to close. I'm not sure. I see some questions here. April 25th is a Saturday, so I think, Aurora, we need to verify that. So see if that is the case and update it. So we'll get that to you if that is the case. No ask for you to give up your weekends. But thank you very much.
Maybe very quickly, because I see that Sophie is asking in the chat about how do we move for the joint letter. Maybe it might be worth a separate conversation directly with FPA. We can help connect you via email, and then we can check with them how would this be well received in with format and shape, so they can also help us, guide us in doing that joint effort, if that works with you, Sophie. Okay, so I will be in touch.
So wishing everyone a wonderful rest of day, evening, wherever you are, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.